Hello you guys and welcome back to Hot Girls Eat Carbs. I'm your host Brittany McChrystal and this is your cozy corner of the internet where we chat all things health, wellness and sustainable weight loss. Now before we get into today, I just want to address a few things. Firstly, the eye patches. So for those of you that have been tuning in for a while and those of you that are new here and may not know, my dad actually passed away last year suddenly. And today is his birthday. So I have been a little bit emotional all morning and I had my plan to record today. I've had a lot of issues with the podcast recently with the microphone not working, the camera's not working. So things have been a little bit hard and I was like, I need to get this done. And so you know what? I'm emotional today. I'm just going to roll with it. So this is why I'm wearing the eye patches. But let's just do a little weekly recap because, I've had some drama. So if you've been listening to the last couple of episodes, you may have noticed that the audio has been a little bit off. I'm sorry. So for a few weeks, I was convinced that my microphone was completely dying. And to be fair, it was just some random microphone that I picked up from Amazon. It was like $100, basically the cheapest one with the best reviews that I could find. And to be fair, it was really good. It worked for ages. I've dragged it around the world with me. It's come to like so many different continents. It's been thrown in suitcases. So I thought that it had just reached the end of its life. And at the same time, I had also just bought a new camera. So I was trying to figure out all the logistics behind all of this. And I wasn't quite sure if it was the camera. Firstly, I thought it was the camera. And then I was like, cool, I've just wasted money on this camera that I was meant to be using for my podcast. And then I decided to switch the week after, use my iPhone to record. And also then I found that the same thing happened. And actually last week, the microphone completely switched off. So it probably was at the end of its cycle. So that's why the sound didn't sound too great in the last one. Also the one before that, it was a bit patchy. So I went out and bought myself a brand new fancy microphone. Hi. She's stunning. But at that point I was like, okay, I need to get a new one. She's, very professional. Let's go with that. And I plugged it in and guess what? The microphone was never the problem. It turns out it was my Mac and the computer that I'd actually plugged the microphone into. I think I'm just a girl, okay? I didn't realize, I forgot that you had to update iOS settings. And my iOS is sitting at, I think, iOS 13, which is back from 2023, I believe. We're now in 2026. I have not updated my computer in 3 years. So I realized that was probably the issue. Restarted it, updated the system, and all of a sudden, it's working again. So technically I spent $300 on a microphone I didn't need, but do I regret it? Not really, because she fancy. And I also feel like it was a time for an upgrade anyway, and the audio probably sounds so much better. So we're just going to pretend that it was a planned purchase. Also, I'm trialing out a new camera today, so there's a lot of new things going on with the podcast. But thank you for sticking with me through the audio dramas, though. I do appreciate it more than you guys know, because it is really hard when you put your heart and your soul into something and you just feel like you're trying so hard and then it just keeps backfiring on you. Now, let's talk about my week, because I have been locked in. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I've got a completely different outlook on life here at the moment. When I first moved back to Melbourne, I definitely struggled with the adjustment. I was stressed, trying to find my routine again. And if I'm honest, I spent a lot of my time trying to fill my days with keeping myself busy and things that didn't actually really matter. And I've been here for over 6 months, and which is actually crazy to think about that it's been half a year. Thailand feels so long ago, but also was 6 months ago. I've really been enjoying the simple things again. One of my best friends, Rachel, we've been friends for so many years. She moved to the area, which is so cool. So we've been going to Pilates together, grabbing coffees, catching up during the week, and it just feels really nice to have your people close to you, because for so many years I didn't have that in Thailand. And Rach actually moved from the Gold Coast, so it's been really cool having her here. And oh my goodness, you guys, also another drama. Tell me I'm just a girl without telling me I'm just a girl. When we first moved here, I bought a Range Rover. Woohoo! How amazing. It's my dream car. I thought she was cute. I thought she was practical. Turns out nobody informed me that diesel cars actually need to be driven. Apparently, if you have a diesel car, you're meant to take it on the freeway like weekly and drive it properly so the engine can clean itself and do its thing. Did I know that? Absolutely not. Full stop. So my engine light came on and I was convinced something was majorly wrong with my car. I took it to the mechanic. He basically told me that my car wasn't broken. I was just not driving it enough. He told me that I should basically get rid of my car. Like straight away. He was like, this is a terrible car to have. Why did you do this? Like basically gave me a whole entire lecture without even looking at the car first. He was like, sell it, get rid of it. And he's like, then he explained to me what you need to be doing with the diesel cars. And the fact is that I just wasn't driving it enough. I was like, excuse me, this guy has like a vendetta for Range Rovers. Apparently, driving 5 minutes to Pilates and 5 minutes home is not enough for a diesel. So Rachel and I drove to a vineyard on the weekend because I needed to take my car for a drive, which honestly is the most ridiculous sentence I've ever said out loud. Do you know what the worst part is? After all of that, the worst part was Josh was like, oh yeah, I knew about that. He's like, I completely forgot that that was an actual thing. And I'm like, forgot? Then he starts listing all of these people who had the exact same issue. And I'm like, that information would have been really great 6 months ago. Anyway, after stressing myself all weekend thinking I'm going to have this humongous bill from the mechanic, look, it was still expensive. The engine light after I took it for a drive was still on. I was like, great, I've got major issues with my car. Then all of a sudden yesterday when I picked up this microphone and brought it home, the light was gone. It just turned off. So maybe it's going to be back there today. I don't know. Fingers crossed, I just needed to take my car for a drive. Hopefully that is the end of the story. If not, I may have to get rid of her. She's stunning. But anyway, enough about my drama and let's get into today's episode because I think this is something almost every single person struggles with at some point. And we are talking about self-doubt. I'm talking about the kind that has you overthinking text messages for like 3 hours, questioning every decision you make, comparing yourself to people on Instagram and talking yourself out of things that you haven't even started yet. Because I don't actually think confidence is the problem. I think most people have stopped trusting themselves. So let's start with that idea that confidence is not actually the problem. I think that confidence gets way too much airtime. Everywhere you look, people are telling you that you need more confidence to lose weight, more confidence to start the business, more confidence to leave the relationship, more confidence to put yourself out there. That was a big word. But if I'm honest, I don't think confidence is what most people are lacking. I think that people have just stopped trusting themselves, and there is like a huge difference with that. When I think back to my weight loss journey, the reason why I failed so many times wasn't because I didn't know what to do. Deep down, I knew I needed to move more. I knew that I needed to eat better and be more consistent. The problem was that I had just broken so many promises to myself. It was like every Monday I would say, this is it. This is the week I'm going to stick with it. Then by Thursday, I would be ordering takeout and saying that I'm going to start again next week. Then next Monday would come around and I would do the exact same thing. And every time you do that, you chip away at the trust that you have in yourself. Because eventually your brain starts thinking, yeah, right, okay, we've heard this one before. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. I think that they need a new meal plan. I think that they need more confidence. But really, they just don't believe in themselves anymore. And that lack of trust started showing up in other areas of my life too. I was just doubting myself when it came to weight loss. I doubted myself everywhere. I wasn't just doubting myself when it came to weight loss. I was doubting myself everywhere. I would second guess every decision. I cared way too much about what people thought of me. I would change parts of my personality depending on who I was around because I just wanted people to like me. I would go on dates and spend the whole time trying to be what I thought the other person would want, rather than just being myself. And when you don't trust yourself, you start looking for validation from everyone else. You want other people to tell you that you're doing a good job. You want other people to approve your choices. You want other people to tell you that you're enough because you haven't learned how to do that to yourself yet. Looking back now, I made a lot of decisions from a place of insecurity. I didn't have a strong sense of who I was, and I didn't trust my own judgment. And when you don't trust yourself, it's really easy to hand that power over to other people. The funny thing is, when I eventually lost the weight, it wasn't because I suddenly woke up feeling confident. I wasn't confident at all. I was terrified I'd fail again. The difference was I started keeping those small promises to myself. I said I'd go for a walk, so I went. I said I'd track my food, and I tracked it. I said I'd show up tomorrow, and guess what? I showed up tomorrow. It was nothing glamorous. It was nothing life-changing overnight. But every single time I followed through, I started rebuilding trust with myself. And confidence was just the byproduct of that. And that is why I think that confidence is earned. Not through positive affirmations or looking in the mirror and telling yourself you're amazing. Yes, that stuff is great. But confidence comes from evidence. It comes from proving to yourself over and over again that when you say you're going to do something, you actually do it. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling stuck, maybe the question isn't how do I become more confident? Maybe the question is, what promise can I make to myself today that I'm actually willing to keep? So if confidence isn't actually the problem, then what does self-doubt look like? I think when most people hear the word self-doubt, they imagine standing in front of a mirror and picking themselves apart. And sure, sometimes it does look like that, but I think self-doubt is way sneakier than that. In fact, some of the people who look the most confident on the outside are actually struggling with self-doubt the most. It shows up differently. The first way that I see it is overthinking. And if you are an overthinker, welcome to the club, because I can absolutely be one too. But I've realized over the years that overthinking is often just self-doubt in disguise, because if you've trusted yourself, you would make a decision. Think about how much time you waste going back and forth on things. Should I start the business? Should I post the video? Should I leave the relationship? Should I move cities? And we tell ourselves that we're being responsible by thinking it through, but sometimes we're not thinking, we're actually just scared. We're looking for a guarantee that everything is going to work out before we make a move. And unfortunately, life doesn't work like that. At some point, you have to trust yourself enough to make the decision and figure the rest out along the way. The second way self-doubt shows up is comparison. And social media has made this one so much worse. I don't know about you guys, but I can be having the best day ever, and then suddenly I see someone online and think, wow, maybe I don't have my life together at all. Someone gets engaged, someone buys a house, someone launches a business, someone announces that they're pregnant, someone has the dream body. And then suddenly you're questioning your entire existence. The problem with comparison is that it takes your focus off your own life. Instead of asking, what can I do today to move forward? You're busy watching what everybody else is doing. And the crazy thing is, there will always be someone ahead of you. Always. If your happiness depends on catching up to everybody else, you're going to spend your whole life exhausted. The third way self-doubt shows up is procrastination. And I know people hate hearing this because we all love to tell ourselves that we're just lazy. But most of the time, procrastination isn't laziness, it's fear. You don't start the thing because then you might fail. You don't post a video because someone might judge you. You don't apply for the job because they might reject you. You don't go all in because then you might discover that you're not as good as you hoped. So instead, you stay in preparation mode, researching, planning, waiting for Monday, waiting till next month, waiting for the perfect time. And before you know it, 6 months have gone by and nothing has changed. The last one is probably the hardest to admit, and that's resentment. Nobody likes to think of themselves as resentful. But if you've ever looked at somebody else's success and thought, must be nice, this one's for you because I have definitely caught myself doing this before. You see someone getting the results you want, instead of feeling inspired, you feel annoyed because they're holding up a mirror to something that you want for yourself. And I think sometimes resentment is actually sadness. It's looking at somebody living out the dream that you've convinced yourself that it isn't possible for you anymore. And that's why I think resentment can actually be useful, because instead of asking, why do they have that? Maybe the better question is, why do I want that? Because often the things that trigger us are pointing us towards something that we haven't even been willing to admit yet. And when you put all of these together, the overthinking, the comparison, the procrastination, the resentment, they all come back to the same thing. It's a lack of trust in yourself. When you trust yourself, you stop needing guarantees. You stop waiting for everybody's approval. You stop waiting for permission, and you actually start taking responsibility for creating the life that you actually want. Now, if you're sitting here, okay, that's great, Britt, But how do I stop doubting myself? I think the first thing you need to do is understand that self-doubt does not disappear overnight. It's not like one day you wake up and you suddenly believe in yourself. It's something that you have to build. The first thing I'd do is stop making huge promises to yourself. I think this is where so many people go wrong. They decide that they're going to lose 20 kilos, go to the gym 6 days a week, drink 3 liters of water, meal prep every meal, and completely change their life overnight. 3 days later, you're exhausted and they've quit. Instead, make promises so small that you almost can't fail. Maybe it's a 10-minute walk. Maybe it's hitting your protein goal. Maybe it's drinking 1 extra bottle of water, because every time you follow through, you're collecting evidence that you can trust yourself. The second thing is to stop looking for certainty. I think so much self-doubt comes from waiting for guarantees. We want to know the relationship will work before we get into it. We want to know the business will succeed before we start it. We want to know we'll lose the weight before we commit to the process. But confidence isn't having all the answers. Confidence is trusting yourself to handle whatever happens. And the third thing is to keep promises that you make to yourself in private. Let's be honest, it's really easy to announce your goals, but it's much harder to quietly follow through. I used to tell everybody what I was going to do. Now I focus more on doing it, because your confidence isn't built by talking about your goals. It's built by keeping your word. And lastly, stop making your feelings a deciding factor. Some days you'll feel motivated and some days you won't. Some days you'll feel confident and some days you'll feel insecure, and that's normal. The people who build confidence aren't the people who feel amazing all the time. They're the people who keep showing up when they don't. You don't need to believe in yourself every day. You just need to keep showing up long enough that you eventually start to. So this actually leads me into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, and that's the signs that you're giving your power away. I think a lot of people are walking around feeling completely stuck in their lives, but they don't actually realize why. They just think that they're unlucky, or they need more motivation, or they need a better plan, but they've slowly handed over their control without even realizing it. And trust me, I've been there. I think we all go through periods of our lives where it's like things are happening to us instead of something that we've been creating. So here are 4 signs that you might be feeling powerless in your life right now. And the first one, here are 4 signs that you might be feeling powerless in your life right now. The first one is that you complain more than you take action. And before everybody comes at me, I'm not saying that you can never complain. We all vent. We all have bad days. Life isn't sunshine 24/7. But there is a difference between venting about a problem and building a personality around the problem. I think we've all met that person. No matter what solution you give them, they'll have a reason why it won't work. They want to lose weight, but tracking calories is too hard. They want to save money, but everything is too expensive. They want a better relationship, but they don't want to have difficult conversations. They want a different job, but they never apply for anything else. And after a while, you realize they're not actually looking for solutions, they're looking for reasons. I remember when I was trying to lose weight, I used to do this all the time. I'd complain about feeling uncomfortable in my body. I'd complain that none of my clothes fit. I'd complain that I hated photos of myself. But if I was being completely honest, for a long time I wasn't doing much about it either. I was spending more energy talking about the problem than solving the problem. And that was a hard truth to accept, because at some point you have to ask yourself, do I want sympathy or do I want to change? I know that probably hit hard. The second sign is blaming your circumstances for everything. Now, obviously circumstances matter. I'm not saying everybody starts at the same place, because we know that they don't. Some people have more challenges than others. Some people have less time, less money, less responsibilities, more responsibilities. Life isn't always fair. But I've learned that the most successful people focus on what they can control. The least successful people focus on what they can't. I see this all the time with weight loss. Someone will tell me that they can't lose weight because they work full time. Another client who also works full time loses 20 kilos. Someone says they can't exercise because they have kids. Another mum finds a way to make it work. The difference isn't circumstances. The difference is where they're putting their focus. One person is looking for evidence that it's possible, and the other is looking for evidence that it isn't. And guess what? Both people usually find exactly what they're looking for. The third sign is waiting until you feel motivated. This one is probably the biggest trap of them all, because motivation feels amazing. When motivation is there, everything feels easy. You meal prep, you go to the gym, you drink your water, you tick all the boxes. But motivation is so unreliable. Some days it's there, some days it's nowhere to be found. If your entire life depends on feeling motivated, you're going to spend most of your life waiting. One of the biggest lessons I learned during my journey was that successful people don't rely on motivation. They rely on commitment. There was so many days where I didn't want to go for a walk. So many days where I just could not be bothered, but I did it anyway. A perfect example was last week. I was so tired. I didn't want to go to my workout class that I booked. I had opened my app and I was so close to clicking the cancel button. Like, you guys, I had it up on my screen and I was like about to click it. And then I stopped and I was like, wait, what are you doing? You preach that discipline matters, but you can't even get yourself to a gym appointment. And let alone if you cancel it, it's going to cost you $25. So I stopped. I got up. I went to the gym. And guess what? I felt freaking amazing afterwards. Like, so good. I pushed myself so hard in that workout class. It was such a big realization for me that we need to stop letting our minds take over and do the things that we said that we were going to do for ourselves. The fourth sign is believing that everybody else has something that you don't. This is sneaky because we all do it. We look at successful people and think they're just naturally confident. They're naturally disciplined, they're lucky, they're talented, they have better genetics. I used to say it all the time. They have more money, they have more support. It's really funny because a lot of people will probably look at me and they'll be like, she's so confident speaking. How can she just speak like that on camera? Let me tell you guys, when I first started speaking, I was a nervous wreck. I couldn't even say one line without stopping. It would take me like an hour to film the tiniest bit of content. And like, I understand that yes, some people might have more money. Yes, they might have more support. Yes, there are some things that their scenario is just a little bit better. But what we don't see is everything that happens behind the scenes and the things that they have to work through. We see the result, but we don't see the years of work. We don't see the setbacks. We don't see the failures. And we don't see the sacrifices. One thing I've realized is that most people aren't different from you as you think that they are. They're just willing to stay uncomfortable for longer. They're willing to keep going when things get hard. They're willing to keep showing up before they feel ready. When I started losing weight, I was not confident. When I started my business, I was not confident. When I started this podcast, oh my God, I was not confident. I was learning as I went, just like everybody else. The difference wasn't the confidence. The difference was that I just stopped waiting to feel ready and I started moving before I felt ready. So if you're listening to this and you've recognized yourself in some of these signs, please know that this is not me judging you at all. I've been every single one of these people at different stages of my life. The good news is that if you've learnt these patterns, you can unlearn them too. Because the moment that you stop blaming, stop waiting, and stop comparing and start taking responsibility for what you can control, you take your power back. And that is where things start to change. I just want to quickly touch on what to do when, frankly, you don't like yourself. And I know that sounds harsh. I think a lot more people feel this way than they're willing to admit. Because when people talk about confidence, they often talk about it from the perspective of somebody who already has it. They'll tell you to back yourself, believe in yourself, love yourself, speak kindly to yourself. And yeah, all of that sounds great. It's really hard to do that when you're sitting there thinking, yeah, I don't actually like who I am right now though. And I come across this all the time with my clients. And we have to have a big sit down and I have to have a heart to heart with them because I get it. There was a period in my life where I genuinely didn't like myself. Actually, multiple periods of my life when I didn't like myself. Not just physically though. I think that's the assumption that people make. They think that because I lost weight, I was all about my body, but I wasn't. I actually didn't like the person I was becoming. I didn't trust myself. I was constantly letting myself down. I was saying one thing, I was doing another. I'd tell myself that this was the week. I was finally going to stick with it, and then I'd quit a few days later. I'd make excuses. I'd avoid uncomfortable situations. I'd play it small, and then not only that, I was being mean. I was mean to myself. I was mean to other people because my scenario in my head, I just felt shitty, and I was projecting that on everybody else as well. And after years of doing that, it's hard to look at yourself and feel proud because deep down, you know that you are capable of more. I think that's one of the most frustrating feelings in the world, knowing that there's more in you, but feeling like you can't access it. And I think one of the biggest mistakes was believing that I needed to like myself before I started changing. I thought that confidence would come first. I thought that motivation would come first. I thought that self-love would come first. I thought that one day I'd wake up and I'd feel amazing about myself and that everything would magically fall into place. But that is not what happened. In fact, it was the complete opposite. The confidence came after, the self-respect came after, and the trust came after. I know I touched on this before. But because all of those things were built through action, and I say confidence is earned, but self-respect is also earned too. And it's really funny because I think when you don't like yourself, you start looking for huge solutions. But what if the answer was simply becoming somebody who just kept their word? Because if you ask yourself right now who you admire, chances are you'd describe someone who has integrity, someone who follows through, someone who doesn't say they're going to do it, someone who does what they say they're going to do, someone who can be relied upon. Why wouldn't you want to become that person yourself? I think one of the biggest shifts I made was stopping asking myself, how do I feel today? And started asking myself, what would the person I'm trying to become do today? Because my feelings changed constantly, but the future version of me was consistent. So I want you to ask yourself this. When you feel yourself going into a slump, I want you to envision the person that you want to be. And you start asking yourself, what would the best version of me do in this situation? What would the version of me that I'm trying to become do? And follow through with that every single time. So before we wrap up today's episode, I want to give you something practical to take away from all of this. Because I know that some of you will be listening and thinking, okay, Brett, this all sounds great, but what do I actually do? I think the answer is a lot simpler than people expect. After this episode, I want you to grab your notes app, write down 3 promises that you've been making to yourself for months. Not the things you started last week, the things that keep coming up over and over again. Whatever it is, write down 3 things that you'll say you'll do one day. Then look at this list and ask yourself one question. What's one thing I can do in the next 24 hours? And here is the important part. Don't choose something massive. Don't write lose 20 kilos, start a business, or be more confident. Those aren't actions, they're outcomes. Instead, ask yourself, what's the very first step? If you want to lose weight, maybe it's going for a 20-minute walk tomorrow. Then follow it up by going again the day after and the day after. If you want to start a business, maybe it's finally registering the domain name you've been talking about for 6 months. When I first started drafting up my new business, it was so hard for me to sit down planning because I had so much doubt until I wrote it down. I spent 1 hour a day on this new business and then boom, it was easier. It was just a non-negotiable 1 hour. Even if I sat there with like little monkeys in my head, it was still 1 hour that I was doing it. And now I feel like I have to physically stop myself after that 1 hour and I just want to keep going and keep going and keep going. Because I think where people get stuck is that they become so focused on the end goal that they actually never take the first step. As we wrap up today's episode, I think the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is that self-doubt isn't something wrong with you. It's usually just a sign that you've stopped trusting yourself. And I think that's good news. Because if self-doubt came from lack of confidence, it would be pretty hard to fix. But if self-doubt comes from a lack of trust, it can be rebuilt. You don't rebuild trust by yourself by saying positive affirmations in the mirror. You rebuild trust by actually following through, by doing the thing that you said you were going to do. Anyway, my loves, thank you so much for hanging out with me for another episode of Hot Girls Eat Carbs. If you did enjoy today's episode, please like the show, share it with a friend that may need to hear this too. It's how this podcast grows, so it does mean the world to me. And if you do love it, then share it on your story too. That would be amazing, and tag me. I would love to reshare. Remember, confidence isn't built from before you start, it's built because you started. I will chat to you in the next episode. Bye.